Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of this painting. In my last video I painted the sky, and today I'll be working on the ocean and sand dunes. I'm going to start by mixing my colors for the ocean. I'll be using two main colors, a lighter watercolor and a darker watercolor, both leaning slightly towards purple. You can see me mixing those here, and in a few minutes I'll have them labeled on screen along with the reference image so you can see how they compare. I'll begin by painting with the darker watercolor along the horizon line. Then I'll take the lighter color and gently push it up into the darker one. After that, I'll layer in some horizontal lines throughout the water using the darker color. I'll paint around those lines with the lighter color, letting things soften and blur a bit. I don't try to keep every line perfectly intact. This helps create a nice layered foundation for the next stage. Next, I'll take that same lighter watercolor and add fine lines over the still wet surface. It may look like a lighter color that I'm using, but it's just because the two colors blended together on the surface and look darker. So I'm just carefully adding small lines across the surface to build texture. Once that's done, I'll mix a bit of pink from the sky color I created in the previous video into the lighter watercolor and repeat that same step that I just did. This pinkish white color helps reflect the sky's color onto the water. I'm going to let the ocean completely dry before moving on. That way when I start painting the sand dunes, none of the sea oats will blend into the water. Now I'll mix my colors for the sea oats. I start with a very dark brown, then mix several lighter browns in varying shades. Most of them lean warm, more orange and bright because that's what I'm seeing in the reference photo. I'll have one really dark brown and a couple of medium browns and a few bright orange brown tones, and those are the colors I'll work with for this section. To begin painting, I'm using a comber brush from Rosemary & Co. to create texture across the entire background of the sea oat area. If you don't have one of these brushes, you can use an old dried out brush or even cut the bristles on a brush you don't care about. I'm still using liquid as my medium, but I'm also adding a little bit of my paint thinner, the Gamsol, together with the liquid to create a smoother, more fluid consistency to help create these really fine brush strokes. Here's a clip of my palette so you can see how I'm mixing the colors and creating different tones. I also demonstrate the basic grass stroke on my palette so you can see the shape and consistency that I'm aiming for. At this stage, I mostly stick to the darkest and medium brown tones. I intentionally ignore the lighter colors for now, and I go back and forth between these darker values, focusing on where the shadows fall in my reference photo. This is really important. Those darker areas help separate the sea oats into individual clumps. If you add grass strokes everywhere without paying attention to the shadows, it'll just look like lines instead of grasses. So here's a tip for painting the sea oats that are extending over the ocean. In my reference photo, the grasses look slightly see-through because light is passing through them. To create that effect here, I mix a bit of the ocean color with my dark brown to make a muted brown purple tone, and I use that color only where the sea oats overlap the ocean. It creates the illusion that light is shining through the grasses. Next, I switch to a smaller comber brush from Rosemary & Co. and lightly add texture using the medium brown across the painting. Then I go back in with a rigger brush to define some of those strokes and create the illusion that there's separate sea oat plants. The comber brush really just speeds up the process by layering in some background texture so I don't have to paint every single tiny grass stroke behind it. At this point, the darkest brown layer is fully in, but the painting looks a bit dull. So now I'm going to move on to those lighter brown tones. I apply these only to the highlighted areas I see in my reference photo, layering them on top of the darker browns to build depth. After that, I switched to some of my lightest browns that I'm going to be using, and this is where I start loosening up and getting more creative. In the earlier layers, I was very intentional with the direction and grouping. Now with the lightest colors, I can add stray grasses going in different directions, curving and crossing, and bending, just like in the reference photo. In my reference photo, a lot of the sea oats are going in one direction, but there's a ton of overlapping and like movement. So this really helps make them feel natural and alive and not stiff. I'm stepping back from the canvas often here and just tweaking things until it feels right. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you're wanting to see how I painted the clouds and the acrylic underpainting, I have a part 1 that shows that process. Thanks so much for watching.